candidates this close to an election?
Yeah, that is absolutely their policy, Lester. In fact, the DOJ has now entered what they call the quiet period, where prosecutors avoid announcing anything that they think could influence voters. But it was the judge, not the special counsel, who made this filing public. Lester.
All right, Ken Delaney is starting us off. Thanks. Let me bring in Garrett Haake now, who's covering the Trump campaign. Garrett, with early voting already underway in many states, the question being asked tonight, could this impact the race?
Well, Lester, the conduct described in this filing has already led Donald Trump to being impeached and to that months-long blockbuster congressional investigation. It's hard to imagine that the new details here alone revealed could shift the opinion of voters about an issue that has been so thoroughly publicly vetted already. But all of the polling shows this is going to be an incredibly close race right to the end. And relitigating such a divisive chapter in the Trump presidency is certainly not the way the Trump campaign wants to be closing out this race. Lester?
Okay, Garrett Haake, thank you.
I want to say something about that. If the new information that they got, that they didn't have before, has now suddenly surfaced, that means that investigators and detectives did not do their job. That means that the courts did not do their job. That means that the whole shooting campaign is inadequate. And why should the people trust something that is basically untrustworthy?
The Middle East is on edge tonight for Israel's potential retaliation after that massive missile attack by Iran. While most were shot down, we are also getting a first look at some of the
I'm going to go forward right here on the damage.
Look at some of the damage they caused. Richard Engel has late details.
I thought this was going to go to the damage on the on the president's visit today. This is significant too, but I already recorded it on another recording, so I don't want to record it twice on the same thing. So I'm going to go directly to the storm damage over here in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. Man, this is just horrible. Look at all that. Kind of makes you question which is worse.
Damage caused by hurricane.
The man-made damage or the forces of nature damage. All right, here we go.
Important time to watch from this weekend through next week.
Okay, Richard, thank you. Here at home, growing desperation in the southeast and communities cut off by flooding damage caused by Hurricane Helene. For some, the struggle to get drinking water could go on for weeks. Sam Brock is in North Carolina.
For the saturated and stunned residents of Swannanoa, North Carolina.
There's 6 inches of just the wettest, sludgiest mud that you could think of across the whole house.
Finding even small keepsakes.
This is the first picture taken with my grandfather and my youngest daughter, Celeste.
Can be massive moral victories.
These are things you can't get back. There's no amount of FEMA that will put these pictures back.
This working class neighborhood accessible now for the first time as some roads have opened up and community needs crystallizing like the eye of a storm.
I think the hardest thing right now is there's no power, there's no water, cell service is spotty at best.
With roads destroyed, mules are carrying food to some cut-off communities.
If you have different family members across the community and you can't reach them, you don't know if they're okay.
All of this against the backdrop of a death toll quickly rising, with more than 90 killed in North Carolina as President Biden took an aerial tour Wednesday. Every single X that you see on a car or structure is a sign of something searched. There are 1, 2, 3 vehicles here, 1 shed, that makes 4, and countless other structures that can't even be accessed. The roofs on some homes punctured by people escaping as those injured are facing untenable conditions at some hospitals.
Everything people see on the news, it's worse in person. It's worse.
Sure.
Hannah Drummond works at Mission Hospital in Asheville,
in other words,
where she says 200
pictures don't justify it.
Placed in an ER meant for 100.
They ran out of food for us on Saturday, so the patients and the staff in the ER weren't eating. When you can't use the toilets, that means I have to find a commode and I have to find a biohazard bag or some kind of receptacle.
HCA Health, which oversees the hospital, has not responded to multiple NBC News requests for comment. In eastern Tennessee, a host of neighborhoods remain inaccessible and in dire need of help. Today, a vital lifeline for some as Army Black Hawk helicopters drop supplies to communities still cut off. And back in North Carolina,
God bless you.
Or heartbreak at the food banks. Tanya Peterson telling our Antonia Hilton her grandkids had not eaten in days.
We're running what little gas we got out of a junk car for the generator to be able to heat the bottles up for the babies. It's terrible. We've got people looting for gas coming through your yards. It's awful. It's awful. No one's coming to check on us. No one.
And Sam, this is so horrible, but especially troubling is this lack of water. Is there an update on that crisis tonight?
There is, Lester, and unfortunately.
Now I want to stop. I want to touch up on something. You see, the desperateness that people has had to resort to, as far as looting and etc. Now, keep that in mind. And hopefully it won't, but keep that in mind if the new matter at fault ever breaks loose in this area, it will cut off bridges, roads, communications, towers will go down, people won't have access to ATM machines, and if they do, they won't be working, etc., etc., etc. You cannot hardly get any worse in conditions, survival conditions, than what these people are having to deal with right now. And the reality is just now starting to set in exactly how bad it is. Because I don't care how good of a camera that you got on your phone. I don't care what kind of music you play with some of the pictures of caskets floating down waterways or bridges being torn completely apart. I don't care what kind of camera that you have. It's the same on the same level of Katrina, to where pictures did not do justice in just exactly the reality of how horrendous and how bad that it truly is. My heart goes out to these people so badly, because I'm so familiar with this type of environment, of it being very crucial, very harsh, and as I've said in some of my other material regarding this same storm, usually whenever something like this happens, it will do one or two things. It will either bring out the worst in people, or it will bring out the best. Because there'll be certain people that if you even mention God around them, they'll snarl up and want to smack you in the face. But there'll be other people that want to hear about God, that want to talk about the Bible, that will confess we have done something wrong to cause all this grief and despair to come into our lives. There'll be others that will be submissive to the Word, while others will be just that much more harsh against it. I don't know what it is that drives people that way, but whenever something like this occurs, it'll do it almost every time. It'll do it almost every time.
Sir, unfortunately, this is quite a blow. The county saying that both the water treatment and delivery systems are catastrophically damaged. They cannot even provide an update to residents as to any sort of timeline. This is people are just trying to remove debris from properties and sheared roofs off the front of their yards. Lester.
All right, Sam, thanks for bringing us this story. Vice President Harris also toured some of those storm-ravaged areas today.
And the reason being is because whenever you're dealing with something on basically a need-to-know basis, in response to something that has not occurred before on this level, it has, in fact, blindsided the government, in which it shouldn't have if they'd been keeping up with prophecy and the things that the Bible talks about that's going to occur in the last and final days here upon the planet. And the fact that the mega, the rich, the powerful, the oil tycoons are the ones that's basically created this to begin with, pertaining to our environment changing and seeing astronomical torrential weather patterns evolve and change just as quickly in one direction as they do in another. I was hearing somebody talking the other day over in North Carolina that I guess had been going through a pretty harsh, severe drought, to the extent that they was afraid of forest fires. Well, who would have thought that this was going to be right around the corner towards going from being extremely too dry to now extremely too wet? It talks about these things in the Bible towards them being the sorrows. Woe be unto the inhabitants here upon the earth. Was given as warnings, as advisories, not as threats.
Former President Trump went there earlier this week, all following what was perhaps the last debate before the election. Here's Gabe Gutierrez.
Tonight, a triple threat is looming over the presidential campaign. The rising tensions in the Middle East, a deadlocked port strike threatening to raise prices.
We're hearing from the folks regionally that they're having trouble getting product they need because of the port strike.
And the devastating aftermath of Hurricane Helene.
There's a lot of work that's going to need to happen over the coming days, weeks, and months.
Late today, Vice President
Well, it reflects back to the old saying, whenever it rains, it pours. We're being hit on all angles right now, from A to Z, because of what various politicians did not do that they should have done, that has put everybody in behind the 8 ball. Their delay tactics pertaining to the so-called corporate churches in America is what has caused this, my friends. Is what has caused this.
visiting the storm zone in Battleground, Georgia, 2 days after former President Trump went there. Her trip coming in.
And I know people don't want to hear this. I know they don't. You know, if I was them, I wouldn't want to hear it.
Her trip coming in.
I wouldn't want to hear somebody, such as somebody that lives down here on a two-party road, basically living down here pretty close to the Beach Ridge, Obion County, Weakley County bottoms off the Obion River, next to the Davy Crockett hunting club and Davy Crockett cabin where his mother last resided in Rutherford, Tennessee. I wouldn't want to hear somebody like me that's basically telling the truth. But you know what? My grandmother used to always say to us boys that if a shoe fits, you may ought to wear it. And if you make your bed hard, you're going to have to sleep in it. It's called accountability. And that's one of the things that's wrong with the world right now, is that nobody wants to be held accountable for their own personal actions from A to Z, I guess all the way around the world. And it's just, to me, it's almost like it's snarling. The world in and of itself is like it's snarling up its nose. It's getting louder and louder towards its growls and its complaints, and it's just snarling like a dog. And I consider it towards basically seeing it as the planet being ravaged again and again and again. That the planet Earth is basically regurgitating itself upon the human race right now because of us not paying attention and not listening to the Word of God.
Ingram Angle from Washington tonight. It's great to have you with us. Another desperate move by desperate people. Judge Chutkan unseals a motion, and the libs go absolutely nuts. It's more proof that the DOJ
I've
has
done
been
reported on that. I want to go on.
Style and relentless.
I have no idea if what they're talking about, if they've detected brand new
breaking, quote, make them riot, never before seen evidence again.
Brand new information on
he tried to steal
on Donald Trump or not. If they have, that means somebody didn't do their job.
Bleeding out in the swing states, the emptiness of her campaign,
and if they have it,
her incompetence as vice president,
then somebody needs to go to jail
to...
for lying and misleading the public.
Shoulders once this is completed. It's been a lot of decision making, a lot of discussions with the contract.
I don't know what that's about neither.
Another tool that we have to work with on a daily basis to keep the community safe. Just like
and celebrate our Judaism. So we've definitely seen a great awakening of people getting more involved and being more active. In Carbondale, William Wells Parker, News 3.
In Kentucky, one man is in jail after a standoff with law enforcement. The Graves County Sheriff's Office responded to this incident. It happened yesterday in Farmington, just southeast of Mayfield. The sheriff says deputies were trying to serve a warrant to Anthony Turner for drug and gun charges. Turner was in someone else's house and then refused to come out. He then barricaded himself inside and also threatened to use a gun. Now, after more than
the case Thursday at 1:30. Much of that time has been taken up by a total of
violence, and more violence.
miles where the school is 68. We will be dropping quickly off into the.
See what PBS got to show. Just kind of doing some
More information.
news surfing here. Let's go to this real quick. Now let's go down here.
Climate change.
Nope.
Speaking on behalf of all students and young people in the room tonight, it is truly a special opportunity for us to be together with these candidates and so many members of the 7th District of Virginia in the name of democracy.
Right. So at this point, the United States had only been in existence since 1776. It takes a long time for identities, for nationalism, for emotional ties between citizens and the nation to emerge. And that doesn't happen slowly. It takes repetition of practices and the passing of generations. And so in 1800, most people referred to themselves first as either Virginians or New Yorkers, and then as Americans second. And partly that was a byproduct of the colonial connection to Great Britain. One of my favorite facts is when the Continental Congress first met in 1774 in Philadelphia, more of the delegates had been to London than had been to Philadelphia. And I think that demonstrates where their emotional connections, their intellectual connections, their financial connections were really targeted, and that was London as opposed to some center within the United States. And while that had started to shift by 1800, it was nowhere near the type of American identity we associate with today.
Well, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams had history as founders of this country. Here's historian Edward Larson talking about their relationship.
Over 6 feet 2 inches tall, with high cheekbones and deep-set eyes, Adams towered above most men of his time, even when he slouched, which he often did, especially when seated. Standing, he typically folded his arms tightly across his chest and often had a faraway look. Here, Jefferson's body language betrayed his character as someone who avoided direct conflict, even with himself.